afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr Marti Balaam, and I am a teacher and researcher in compassion in Edinburgh University Medical School and Nursing Studies, and with partners locally and internationally. I also run the Compassion Salon, a compassionate initiative to provide a home and community around new and established authors and poets whose work relates to compassion and well-being. Compassion, I believe, is a game changer, and now more than ever, it gives us together across the world the possibility of a new, more equitable and kind future. And joining me is Dr. Kitty Wheater, the Mindfulness Chaplain at Edinburgh University. Kitty is a mindfulness practitioner and social and medical anthropologist, an all-round marvellous person. And yes, this is the wonderful Amelia Clark. Amelia is a British actress and philanthropist who has earned international acclaim for her television, film and stage roles. Amelia has her own charity, Same You, through which she is working to break the silence on brain injury and transform recovery care. Amelia is also the ambassador to the Royal College of Nursing and Nursing Now. Amelia shares the salon's love of poetry and, like us, has been spreading the power of such to heal and support us during COVID through online poetry readings, though her readers, I have to say, are slightly more impressive than ours. So she has so kindly agreed to start us off with a poem today from the anthology Poetry Pharmacy Returns as a gift to us all. Thank you so much, Amelia. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out of the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you can see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
So moving. Thank you so much for being here, and that wonderful gift of poetry, which, as we all say, just fills us up. And today, thank you for your kindness. So much appreciated.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful conference.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye, Amelia. Bye. Okay, everyone. So for the next 45 minutes, we're going to explore some of the fears that we have, and how wonderful to have Amelia here with us. So thank you first for that. So we're just going to start the slides, if we may. So for the next 45 minutes, we're going to explore the fears that we all have in these challenging and unprecedented times. But those fears we don't often share, and we're going to facilitate some sort of response for ourselves and others. I'm going to begin by explaining what happened to us when we are stressed and beginning to burn out. And then I will define and explain why compassion can help us all in these difficult times and throughout our lives. The salon will also introduce the importance of mindfulness within self-compassion, and Kitty will deliver a mindfulness practice. Throughout the workshop, there will be key questions to explore in the chat box. I think it is to your right. So next slide, please, Hannah. Thank you. So,
sorry about this, everyone. I think we're having some technical difficulty hearing Marti. Kitty, can you hear anything, or is it just me?
I can't. No, I was just messaging you to say I wondered if it was me or if Marti's frozen. What I'll do is I'll just send her a quick WhatsApp and ask her to come back in again. Sorry about this, everyone. Happy Friday morning. And while we wait, you might just like, if you're sitting at your computer, just to maybe have a quick stretch. You may have come from the start of the conference this morning. You may have been in a rush to get things ready and to sit down. So maybe just take the opportunity of a mindful computer freeze to quick stretch and get comfortable in your seat. Okay, I'm not hearing anything from Marti, so I suspect she may be having computer issues. Anna, is that you that I can hear?
Hi, Kitty. Marti's just rejoining now, so she should be with us in a sec.
Okay.
hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm so sorry. If it was just a tiger chasing me around my house and turning my internet off. So I'm really sorry about that. So let's get back to our old brain. I'm really sorry. Hope you're all still there. So we have a brain that was set up 200,000 years ago. And thank you, Kitty. Sorry. Thank you for jumping in there for a minute. We have a brain that was set up 200,000 years ago to ensure survival. That means that, like lions, tigers, and dragons, we are constantly on the lookout for danger. This is why, as humans, we have a tendency towards the negative. Therefore, when we are confronted with danger, we trigger an evolutionary response to prepare us to run away like this caveman. In the past, what Paul Gilbert, a world-leading expert on compassion, calls the old brain, and still to this day, would react to the threat of an advancing hungry bear, if any of those are around. It has to be said, though, this is extremely useful when faced with immediate danger to life. So when we are faced with danger, the body activates the autonomic nervous system, which has an immediate effect on a number of bodily systems. This we know as fight, freeze, or flight response, which as stated allows us to attack, become stationary, or run away. This happens before we are even aware of it. So you can see here on the slide what's happening. The amygdala, or our alarm bell, which is back here somewhere, which actually means almond, incidentally, this part of the brain contributes to emotional processing and it starts ringing. This then sends a signal to the hypothalamus, the command center, activating the sympathetic nervous system. And then the adrenal cortex releases adrenaline into the bloodstream and then cortisol for continued alertness until the bear or dragon has left. This has a number of physical effects, like our hearts beating faster, pushing our blood to vital organs, our blood pressure increases, our vision and hearing become sharper to prepare us for action. And when this happens, and what we'll talk a lot about later on with Kitty, and when we talk about compassion, is our body's parasympathetic system acts like a brake, promoting rest and digest, which calms down the body once the danger is past. So I'm interested to know right now, for you to share in the chat box what you feel like when you're stressed. So next slide, please. Okay, so if you could maybe write along in the chat box some of the things that you feel when you're stressed. So certainly I have a friend actually that gets itchy feet when she's stressed, and my heart races and I talk too quickly and generally have a very definite fear and flight response. Jumpy, yeah, absolutely. Oops, wrong chat. Kitty, what about you?
Yeah, I jumpy. And my shoulders kind of go up here.
Heart races, doomed, yep, sense of doom, lack of sleep, yep. Agitated. Yeah, so these are all the results of that, your autonomic nervous system triggering this fear or flight response. So if Hannah can move me on to the next slide, that would be brilliant. Thank you, everyone. So this warning, stressful slide, but I quite like that because that's the point I'm trying to make, is that this is what happens to us when we're stressed and we feel like we are in a dangerous situation. So when our brain, usually what happens is that our more evolved brains, or our newer brains, can get stuck in this sense of continuing impending disaster. So you can see everything that you're talking about here on the right: sleep, anxiety. You can see on the right the tensing muscles, slow digestion, the hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system, the adrenaline. These are all the impact of the sympathetic nervous system on how you feel. And what can happen is we get constantly stuck in this loop and our brain is prevented from resting. So we feel like we are losing our minds because our frontal cortex, our thinking part of our brain, shuts down because we're concentrating on impending danger, not what's in front of us. So we often say, I can't focus, I feel like I'm losing my mind. We ruminate, we do a lot of what ifs, self-criticism. So eventually what can happen is that often we feel burnt out, and we've talked a lot about this over the last few months in COVID, that we can begin to feel completely emotionally exhausted. Our batteries are drained. We have reduced capacity and creativity, and we find it difficult to connect with others. So this prolonged exposure to cortisol and adrenaline can affect, which we can see on the right, our sleep, our relationships with others. And we lose that ability to trigger our parasympathetic nervous system. The other problem for us with social media is that we are always on this permanent journey for happiness. But sadly, we are always going to fail because pain and loss are a normal part of life, and fear, disgust, sadness are normal emotions, but so is joy. In addition, the mixing of our old brain and its need for survival with our more evolved ones can cause all sorts of problems. I'm going to start getting a little bit more positive in a minute. So whilst our old brain tells us, has clear motives like food, sex, harm avoidance, caring, emotions of anger and anxiety and sadness, and behaviors of fight, flight, shut down, our newer, more evolved brains have a greater capacity for reason thought, perspective, sense-making, and empathy, which can allow us to evolve and move away from old habits. So if we move on to the next slide, I want to know a little bit about what you are all worried about now in the time of COVID. I feel that that's changed over the last 3 months or whatever time we've been locked down, wherever you are in the world. But we began in a very fearful state. And I think it's very important that we look forward towards hope. But for me, I was very worried initially about, of course, getting COVID or somebody I love dying from COVID. And there were many worries, anxieties, having children at home, trying to work. So I'd like to hear a little bit from you, if I could, in the chat box about the things that you are worried about. I can see straight away, the same as me, family getting it, a second wave, getting infected. Yep. Increasing demand at work. Yeah. The future. And I absolutely see that, because we can't see the future. And a lot of this, and COVID especially, we feel out of control because we don't know what's going to happen next. And whilst we have fear and flight, one of the greatest difficulties at the moment, we've had the fear, but we can't fly. And, and we're looking into something that we don't know what's going to happen next. This is incredibly stressful, anxiety-inducing situation. And a lot of these messages I can see, what I'd like you all to see and get from this is that a lot of us feel the same. We are worried about getting it. We are worried about our family. We are worried about our loved ones. And we are worried about what's going to happen next. So I think it's really important that we take on board that as a human race, we all feel some of the same fears and anxieties. Thank you for all that, everybody. So Hannah, if we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So now let's move on to some good news and how we can help each other. Okay. So what scientists also know about our brain is it changes throughout our lives through learning and experience. This happens through neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, when neurons fire together and wire up and brain cells die and are created. Therefore, we can really make a difference and change our brains. Dr. James Kirby from Queensland University and psychologists at the University of Sussex have confirmed that the impact on the brain of acts of kindness, whatever the motive, has a strong impact on the reward areas of the brain that promote a sense of well-being and contentment. Our highly evolved brain has an even greater capacity for perspective making and empathy. So compassion gives us the choice to use our new brain for care.
Hi everyone, I think we've lost Marti again. Kitty, has the same thing happened for you?
Yeah, I just messaged her. Hopefully she'll just come back in again.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes, we're back.
So hopefully, so sorry about this, everyone. Hopefully you got a little general feel of the ability for our evolved brains to have a capacity for compassion, wisdom, and perspective making. So we talked as well, and I hope you heard that, about training our minds to either help or harm. I'm sure you'll be able to get these slides after as well for any bits that we may have missed. So all this science that I'm talking about this morning gives us powerful evidence of the need and indeed necessity for compassion in our lives. So if we can move on with a slide, that would be great. So firstly, it's important to define what we mean by compassion. Compassion is attentiveness to the suffering of ourselves, really important, and others, with the wisdom and steps taken to relieve it. So it gently demands an action from us, but also the wisdom to know and in what way we are needed. And this may just be by providing a listening ear or by running a bubbly bath for ourselves. Sometimes, though, importantly, compassion is constructed as a behaviour that leads to fatigue and burnout, which can make professionals wary. However, compassion, when we understand it properly, energizes us, where empathy may deplete our battery if we do not incorporate it into compassionate practice. So why compassion? I'm hoping you all can still hear me. So why compassion? So many spiritual traditions stress the needs and benefits of compassion. However, it is only recently that researchers have started to study, find and acknowledge the benefits. One way that scientists have done this is to study our brains, which I've just been talking about. And in particular, the brains of those who are considered compassionate, like mothers or Buddhist monks. This brain imaging shows us that when we even think about kindness, as I mentioned earlier, has a proven effect on our health and well-being. So compassion, here's a surprise, is a pathway to happiness and contentment. Remember earlier, we talked about the need to trigger our parasympathetic nervous system to enable calm and rest. Well, compassion and indeed mindfulness that Kitty's going to talk about is associated with increased parasympathetic response and decreased sympathetic response. Remember our caveman. So the anticipating of our body's break brings about a lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, and our frontal we can think much more clearly because our alarm bells are temporarily shut off. So we become more mindful and creative. So next slide, please, Hannah. Thank you. So this is a wonderful picture by the Reverend Geoffrey Baines from the university, which shows us our vagus nerve. Now, our vagus nerve is part of our parasympathetic calming system. It's our 10th cranial nerve, and in Latin, it's called the wandering nerve. So hence this marvelous picture, because it wanders all the way through the body from the top to the bottom. Okay, so when we trigger a parasympathetic response, our vagus nerve it is triggered by mindfulness or compassion. So when we receive compassion to ourselves or to others, this tells us the world is safe, reducing our levels of stress hormones. Indeed, compassion can be seen as vitamins for our mind. So next slide, please. So self-compassion, really important, and that's really what I want to get a key to today. This is about becoming aware of and alleviating one's own suffering, which we are talking about here on the right in the chat box today. And the earlier definition from myself and Reverend Dr. Harriet Harris from Edinburgh incorporates the self. Next slide, Hannah, because compassion is incomplete if we do not include ourselves in those who need compassion. Because if you are kind to yourself, you are in the right mind to do it for someone else. And if you don't care for yourself, you cannot care for anybody else. And that's why this oxygen mask picture is so very important. So next slide, please. So Dr. Kirsten Neff, an educational psychologist at the University of Texas, Austin, states there are 3 key elements of self-compassion. Recognizing that we all have suffering. We must be kind to ourselves, and mindfulness, which is about expressing your ability to pay attention and bring your attention to something with non-judgmental acceptance. But I'll let Kitty talk about this a little bit more. So self-compassion is a very powerful tool for meeting our needs and helping us care for others. For example, as nurses, if we are stressed by a busy and demanding shift, if we can acknowledge the difficulties this is causing us, so that we are then able to look after ourselves with regard to this stress. We can also see in our workplaces specifically, that those that are suffering can often hurt others when we take out our unhappiness on other people. Therefore, living with compassion towards ourselves protects us and those around us. So I just want to talk a little bit about belonging, because when we have done these webinars before, people have said, how can I be close to people, be compassionate and be kind at a distance? Because we're used to the language of physical distancing. And belonging, and we can really tell this now, belonging and indeed attachment to others is a basic human need, acknowledged to be more fundamental than the need for knowledge, understanding and esteem. Indeed, we are interdependent as a species and programmed to care. We can see this when we acknowledge the difficulties we are now encountering being physically distanced from others. Indeed, studies in animals have found when social contact is removed, it triggers a rise in anxious behaviour and a decrease in learning and memory. In a recent study just come out in the Lancet last week on the effects of COVID-19 and social deprivation on adolescent development and mental health, the authors highlighted the urgent need for face-to-face social contact outside households as a vital requirement in adolescent development. Our sense of belonging then has been completely disrupted. So we need to focus on what Paul Gilbert calls safe relating instead of distancing. We can do this by making plans together, communicating face to face, sharing, acknowledging worries and sharing wisdom, not panic. So compassion and connections to others is a human motive, just as is competing with each other. We can see it in our compulsion to try and alleviate or prevent suffering in others, but also in examples of human cruelty, so evident in the last few months. So what I'd like to do now is let's turn this round and let's enrich this conversation and have some joy and talk about our soul food. I want to ask you now, what makes you happy? So if I can have the next slide, please, Hannah. So a smiling cat. So what I'd like us to do now, everyone out there, is to share in the chat box, what are the things that make you feel good? What are the things that are helping you through this difficult time? Be it a bubbly bath or walk, so many things, chocolate, absolutely, wildflowers. I absolutely feel that with COVID as well. When we went into COVID, it was spring. So it really did give us a sense of hope that things were going to change. And hope is such an important thing at times like this. And that's why planning is really important. So when my daughter says, I love you, Mama, that's gorgeous. Travel, llamas, really important, llamas. Good food, good weather. We've been blessed actually in Scotland with some quite good weather, which isn't usual. Seeing other people happy. And that's really important, isn't it? That often our kindness to others and compassion to others doesn't drain us, but reserves and fills up our battery because we feel good when we're good to other people. A new book, sense of humour, absolutely. Chocolate, lots of chocolate. Time off work to relax, absolutely. And time off this sort of electronic or mediums, because as a lecturer, I've spent a lot of time in front of a screen. Thank you, Kitty, working with Marty. Thank you. So thank you. As that keeps going, I'm going to move on to the next slide to talk a little bit about why all this stuff helps. Hannah, can you move me on? Thank you so much. So back to a tiger, not a dragon. So all these things that are helping: home, chocolate, making videos, games, family, quality time with family. All these things, Kirsten Neff tellers and other researchers in self-compassion say that people that practice self-compassion, which is all this stuff, and thank you, whoever said I'm picking up ideas here. Oh, it was Kitty. Thank you, Kitty. Shows that those that practice self-compassion are happier, grateful, and have better relationships with others, less stressed. Indeed, this self-compassion, being with families, talking, touring, friends, games, chocolate, is an important and powerful antidote to imposter syndrome, self-criticism, self-doubt, perfectionist thinking, competition, looking at Facebook, social media, comparing ourselves. So this perfectionist thinking can lead to stress, anxiety, and depression. So what we need to do is pull on these things that make us feel better. And I'll talk about the sort of things that I do in a minute. A good drink, thanks, Rohit. So we're also more resilient and stronger. So we can bounce back more easily from setbacks, and we are more likely to learn from mistakes. So if we go to the next slide now, the next two slides are hints and tips of things that I have found really help me during COVID. So we'll talk a bit about this, and then we're going to talk about ways to trigger your vagus nerve and parasympathetic nervous system. And then Kitty's going to do that in real life for us. So hints and tips. Slowing down. Yeah, because I think originally at the very start of COVID, we were all rushing to get things done. And, you know, I'm going to learn Spanish, Italian, write a novel. We all did that at the beginning, or some of us did that at the beginning. And I know certainly J.K. Rowling told all the coaches out there just to chill out a little bit because it was too much pressure. So we tend to, as human beings, put ourselves under way too much pressure of what we want to achieve. So Stephen Fry, actually, within the first couple of weeks of COVID, say, slow down everything, because we have more time. We may not have, you know, be traveling into work. There may be spaces. A lot of us are working full time and double what we did before, but just using spaces and even time and space in your head just to slow down when washing the pots or talking or just walking from the post box and back. So slow down with purpose. And I know that Kitty will talk about that a little bit more. Be gentle and nice to yourself. The things we say to ourselves, we would never say to our friends because we would have no friends. We really give ourselves a tough time. I should be doing this. I'm not as good as that. I don't have as much as that person. I'm going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, etc., etc., etc. Be nice. We are with ourselves for a long time. Be nice to yourself and say, you've got this, because we're 3 months down the line. We have got this. We are strong, and what we have achieved is incredible. So be kind to yourself. Give yourself a hug, and pat yourself on the back. We are here, and we have done incredibly well through, incredible, challenging circumstances. So this bit, what's your soul food? You may have another word for that. That's my thing, is what fills you up, what makes you feel better. Find it. It may be Elvis Presley movies, it may be opera, it may be wandering, chasing your chickens around the garden. Whatever it is, find it and enrich yourself with it. Another thing I found during COVID is the ability to say to yourself, do I need to do this right now? And if you don't need to do it, please, I give you permission, and give yourself permission not to do it. Unless it is absolutely essential, it can wait. Now, don't do what ifs. This is a biggie, and I think Kitty would agree with me about this. We spend a lot of our mind space saying, what if this happens? What if there's a second wave? What if one of my family members are ill? Try to prevent that word, because what it does is triggers your sympathetic nervous system and makes you more nervous and more upset, and then you can tend to go round and round in a circle. All this, and compassion and time and mindfulness, is about taking a pause and giving yourself some space. Very early on at the start of COVID, I have to admit to taking to the sofa for some time and watching all the Marvel movies. And that's sort of okay. But there came to a time after about 5 or 6 days, not weeks, where I said, I'm going to have some sort of schedule here. I also have teenage children who don't get out of bed. So it became really important to have some sort of structure to the day, even if it's just your 3 meals or breakfast, or even, anything that just gives a little bit of structure and normalness to your day. And importantly, what I also did at the start of COVID is I read too much social media about COVID. I looked at the news too much. Now, all this does is keep our tiger chasing us. We need to find time for the news, absolutely, but try and cut that down. And I wonder actually in COVID if people are doing that less now, and that was an initial trigger. So cut down on the news. Appreciate the small things that you are all talking about in terms of a flower in the garden, a chicken, beautiful piece of chocolate, a drink, whatever it is. Appreciate that small stuff, because that is the important stuff, and that is the stuff that makes you feel good. My milkman brings a bottle of milk to the bottom of the stairs now. That wasn't happening to COVID. Getting my milk in a glass bottle is just marvelous. That is a small thing, but makes me feel so much better. So can we go on to the next slide, please, Hannah? Thank you. So this is my beautiful cat, Merlot, there. with very good vagal tone. I think, Kitty, that cats may have very good vagal response because they're completely unstressed out and relaxed. So these are some of the things, remember, that we talked about, that push away your tiger and improve your vagal tone, give you space and help you relax. So breathing is so, so important, and how we breathe. A lot of us, when we're stressed, we breathe right up here. So it's really important, and there's loads of apps and things that help us to do really good, deep diaphragm. I can't say that word, Kitty. Important to breathe properly. Our posture is important. Reducing alcohol, eating well, a Mediterranean diet. It's all about keeping well. Yeah. Resting, sleeping. And I know a lot of you said that you can't sleep or you're anxious, but trying to have some sort of sleep hygiene or routine. For me, it's getting off this and having time out with this. And looking, actually, lots of phones now tell us how many hours we've been on it. And it can be quite shocking when you look at the end of a week. I could have actually written that novel I want to write if I'd kept off my phone. So it's really, really important to just find space from the things, and don't do the things before bed that keep you awake. Acupuncture, singing and chanting. Who knew? Brilliant. There's loads of online choirs at the moment. Singing is really, really makes you feel good. And mindfulness. So I am now going to hand over to the wonderful Kitty Wheater to talk to us a little bit and to trigger our parasympathetic response for us. Thanks, Kitty.
Thank you, Marti. So I'm getting a little bit technical feedback. I can hear your voice. Is that a problem for anyone else?
Kitty, it's just because Marti's not muted. I've just muted you, Marti.
Perfect. Okay. So we're just going to swap over to share my screen.
You've done that problem so well. I don't know what's happened there. It seems to be every time you put the iPad up.
I can hear someone else talking. Do you want to just make sure that your mic's on mute? That'd be great. Thank you. Okay. So I think it would be great just to start. I mean, Marti mentioned posture in that last slide, and it might be helpful literally to just check in with your own posture in this moment. And not posture in the sense of, am I sitting right? But just, how does my body feel sitting in front of this screen right now? You may have noticed that you're kind of slumping a little bit, or if you're feeling quite kind of agitated this morning, or you're just kind of actually just really engaged in what Marti was talking about, you might be kind of staring at the screen like this. So just checking in with, okay, how am I sitting right now? How does my body feel? Does it feel comfortable? And maybe, as we did earlier, just having a little bit of a stretch, and that might be that just one arm kind of comes up, you just have a bit of a reach, and maybe the other arm comes up and you have a bit of a reach, just in your seat. And maybe you just rotate the shoulders a little bit, just in whatever way is comfortable for you. So maybe back and forward, and just allow the hands to rest. And again, just checking in with, okay, how does my body feel right now sitting in my seat? So just noticing that. And I think probably the simplest way into understanding what mindfulness is and how it can be helpful is to start to notice how, in any given moment, our sense of well-being, happiness, mental health in a particular moment depends on where we place our attention. So thinking of attention or awareness as kind of like a perceptual field. Awareness is like a broad perceptual field in which our focus goes to the most intense stimulus in that field. So again, just noticing right now what that is for you in this moment. So it might be the sound of my voice. It might be that you feel hungry or thirsty or tired. it might be that you're sitting here in front of your screen, but actually your mind is somewhere else. You're still thinking about something that was said earlier, or a session that's coming later, or maybe you're thinking about something else entirely. So we can just start to notice in any given moment, where is my attention being pulled right now? And as human beings, much of the time, our attention is being pulled to this thinking. So we have this remarkable capacity to relive the past, pre-live the future, bounce around between the two without necessarily spending much time inhabiting the space in between the present. And for good evolutionary reasons, as Marti was saying earlier, when we are thinking, when the mind is in thought, it tends to get drawn to what is most difficult or most problematic. And sometimes that's quite obvious. It's like, okay, I'm really worried about this. And sometimes it's not so obvious. So, you know, if you're having that persistent refrain in your mind about the deadline, you know, or even if you're hungry and you're just noticing, oh, I'm really hungry, there's that kind of flavor of difficulty. And the mind will always be drawn to what is most difficult in any given moment. So we may not really spend much time at all inhabiting this sense of being a human being, sensing, actually being a body, rather than just a brain trying to make sense of what's going on. So, you know, we may actually, as we sit here, have very little sense of the soles of the feet on the ground, very little sense of the fact that our sit bones are on the chair, and that we're kind of sitting here in space as a body. So, you know, much of the time, our default experience probably looks like this. And what we're kind of interested in starting to do with mindfulness practice to sort of regulate all of these things that Marti was talking about is to practice something that looks a little bit more like this. So actually kind of sensing yourself in space as a body. Now, none of this is to say that thinking and doing are not really useful and helpful. You know, this is, we know from cognitive subsystems research that thinking is a sort of an activity of mind that taps into a particular mode of mind, which we tend to call doing mode. And this mode of mind is particularly useful for getting from A to B, formulating meaning, getting things done, problem solving, strategizing, working things out. You know, we all need this mode of mind. You wouldn't be sitting here as nurses if this mode of mind hadn't served you very well indeed. But where it gets more problematic is where it kind of gets stuck, particularly when we are under stress. So you may find that you are preoccupied with sort of commenting on your life or on your experience rather than just kind of living your life or being in your experience. You probably find that you're planning a lot, even when you don't necessarily want to be, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning. As many of you mentioned, we're all a little bit short on sleep. So one of the forms of human experience that is really hardest to process in this mode of mind is stress. Stress, depression, anxiety, these kinds of experience, they're not a matter of sort of getting from A to B. They're not problems to be fixed in this sort of thinking, doing kind of sense. And in fact, if you try to do that, you know, you'll probably find yourself stuck in some of this sort of endless rumination. Why do I feel like this? How can I make it go away? You know, at 3 o'clock in the morning. And what the evidence seems to suggest is that when we are experiencing, you know, particularly difficult emotions, fear, anxiety, distress, we actually need to draw on a kind of a different mode of mind in order to allow emotional processing to kind of move through. So we typically throw lots of thoughts at it, and that typically gets us kind of stuck. So what is mindfulness then? So this is a definition that comes from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who many of you might have heard of, who developed mindfulness-based stress reduction in the 70s. So mindfulness involves paying attention on purpose, deliberately, in the present moment, here and now, with curiosity and kindness to things as they are. So not things as we think they should be, as we're afraid they might turn out to be, but things as they actually are in this moment, right here and now. So if we come back to our two modes of self-focus, our two predominant activities of mind, much of the time we're up here, we're in thinking. And you'll notice that there is some sensory information getting through there. So we do notice when we're hungry, we notice when we're tired, we notice when we're in pain, we notice if we're eating a really great pizza. That's probably about it. What we're interested in with mindfulness is dropping into this sort of cross-section of experience that is more about sensing ourselves in this moment. And again, you will notice we're not getting rid of thought here. You know, there can be a perception that mindfulness is about emptying the mind, getting rid of thinking, and therefore that you're somehow doing it wrong if you actually notice lots of thoughts. But actually what people who practice mindfulness and do mindfulness training tend to report is that it's like a lot of that kind of peripheral mental clutter kind of quietens down. It's kind of like the signal emerges from the noise. And you've probably all had experiences of that. So, you know, you're getting really frustrated with a problem and you put it down and you go for a walk. And on your walk, it's like something comes through, you figure out how to solve it, or you have an insight. And what's happened there is that you've actually sort of switched your mode of mind, even without necessarily kind of trying to make it happen. It's just sort of happened. And there is this critical extra ingredient, which is this sense of kindness, sense of interest and friendliness towards your own experience. As Marti said, much of the time we speak to ourselves in ways that if we spoke like that to others, we rapidly wouldn't know anyone anymore. So, you know, it's very difficult to process things and to settle and to see clearly what's really here if we're busy telling ourselves that we shouldn't feel it, that it's not right that we feel it, that we're somehow wrong for feeling it. So, you know, quite deliberately having a sense of, okay, can I be interested in my experience? Can I be kind to myself in this moment? So what I'd like us to do is just do a short mindfulness practice, just a few minutes, to kind of just see what happens and give you a little bit of space on your Friday morning. So the first thing I'd like to invite you to do is, if you would like to do this, you know, we're all spending a lot of time looking at screens, you can just completely darken your screen so that you don't have to look at anything. Or you can keep looking, it's up to you. And you may wish to close the eyes or just sort of lower your gaze. And again, checking in with the sense of the body sitting. It may be helpful to allow the feet to be flat on the ground as you sit here. Sense of the stability of the body in its seat. Just allowing the hands to rest on your lap, on the table, wherever they fall. Notice what happens to your awareness when you drop into the body in this way, when you close the eyes. The eyes are constantly taking in, receiving information. Just seeing what it's like to give yourself permission to step out of that in this moment. Sensing the body sitting. And then deliberately bringing your attention into the soles of the feet as you sit here. Noticing their contact with your sock, shoe, the ground. Sensations of touch, pressure, the texture of the sock, bottom of the toes, the balls and heels of the feet. Just sensing how the ground is holding up the feet, allowing the feet to rest. And then moving your attention to the sense of your seat on the chair. So the sense of the sit bones in contact with the chair. The pressure of the sit bones against the chair. Again, that sense of the chair holding you up, supporting you. Often we can find ourselves sort of sitting up away from the chair, particularly if we're very focused or stressed. So just giving your body permission to sit, taking up its space, held up by the chair. And then shifting your attention and allowing the awareness to move into the sense of both hands as you sit here. The weight of the hands in the lap or wherever they're resting. The contact of the hands with each other or with the texture of clothing, table, the space of the hands. And at a certain point you may notice that the mind has wandered, gone off into thinking. Could be thinking about the experience, could be thinking about something else. And knowing that thinking is okay. So just acknowledging where the mind has gone and very gently just beginning again, dropping back into the sense of both hands as you sit here. The weight, the contact, the space of the hands. And then just for a moment, seeing what it's like to bring back into awareness as well the sense of the feet and the sit bones and the hands. So there's a sense of awareness pooling and grounding you in this moment. The feet on the floor, sit bones on the chair, and the weight of the hands. Just noticing what that's like. And then as you sit here, just allowing a question to drop into mind. What have I learned in this session that may be useful for me? What have I learned in this session that may be useful for me? Just seeing what comes up. And then when you're ready, perhaps just wriggling the fingers a little bit, wriggling the toes, opening the eyes if they've been closed. And again, perhaps the body wants to stretch and move a little bit, shoulders, arms. I'm just going to read a lovely poem that Marti has chosen. It's by John O'Donoghue. It's a blessing. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the grey window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colours, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the currach of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marti. That was wonderful. I feel like I got us all wound up and then you calmed us all down and gave us some space. So thank you for giving us that breathing space and time. We really, all of us, I'm sure, really, really appreciate it. So what I want to say finally, and please, anybody feel free to chat away in the chat box, is that most important gift that Kitty and I can give to you is to say to you, be gentle with yourselves, see joy in the smallest of things, fill up your reserves, your battery, don't let them deplete, because it is times like these that we are more inclined to push away the things that we need the most. Okay, so the things that give me joy, like my chicken, my cat, spring, summer on its way, walks with friends in the past, memories, hope, new journeys, new wonderful journeys to have. Please find those things for yourself. And also, please be your own best friend. You are with yourself for a while, and at these challenging times, we need ourselves and each other. more than ever. So thank you, Kitty. There's my chicken. Some wonderful books. This is actually the heart there in the stone is a heart I found in the concrete floor of nursing studies at Edinburgh University. And that is my point I'm trying to make about you can find joy and love everywhere. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing time with us in this Compassion Salon. Thank you to Kitty. Thank you to Amelia. Thank you to Anthony and Hannah, who are there in the background. Namaste, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.